Hello and welcome to another episode of One and a Half Dirty Yanks. I'm Mark Will in Taipei.
And I'm half a dirty Yank in St. Petersburg.
I'm the full-on Yank. We make that little joke because lately we've been engaging with mostly British texts to Shane Meadows films. And then today we will be discussing an episode of the great British sitcom Fawlty Towers. Uh, Let me give a little bit of backstory before we start. First of all, I want to thank friend of show Craig Branch, who initially requested that we do one season of the TV series The Wire, but I don't think you had seen that, and there wasn't
Right.
time to watch an entire season. So, as a kind of compromise, I suggested we do an episode of Fawlty Towers, and Craig recommended that we focus on the episode called Gourmet Night, which is from season one. So that'll be our focus, but we may have occasion to refer to other episodes in the series. For those that don't know, Fawlty Towers was a BBC series. There were two seasons, 1975, and then there was a 4-year break, and the second season came out in 1979. It is by Monty Python alumnus John Cleese and his then partner Connie Booth. Although they got divorced between seasons 1 and 2, and yet still continued to work together.
And
Now,
apparently stayed good friends.
yeah.
So it was like a fairly amicable divorce.
Yeah, I think so. Although now that Fawlty Towers there's a Fawlty Towers reboot in the works, and apparently Connie Booth didn't even know about it till she read it in the paper. So I don't know what's going on there. That doesn't seem very gentlemanly of Mr. Cleese, but I don't know all the details.
Right. She's a
Now,
full-fledged psychotherapist now, right?
she is, yeah. She retired from acting and comedy, and she practices psychotherapy. So I'm
Yeah, and just
told.
very quickly, in his defense, possibly, she took like a 30-year hiatus from even speaking about the show because she claimed it confused her patients. I mean, that was the reasoning she gave. But when Cleese talked about that, he seemed ever so slightly annoyed by that. So maybe he just thinks, well, she doesn't want to hear about it. Why do I need to kind of include her in this reboot? But anyway, continue.
Could be. One never knows. Um, well, let me just explain the significance of this show to me. Uh, it saved my life. And I don't mean to be facetious or hyperbolic, but in a way, I think it's true. I remember being very depressed as an undergraduate, having a kind of existential crisis, uh, maybe even contemplating suicide. And I happened to watch the episode from season 2 called The Kipper and the Corpse. And after after viewing this episode, I felt better. Like the I don't know what it was. I think I identified with Basil, and I too wanted to like jump in the laundry basket and be taken away. but just the fact that I could see that and feel somehow less alone. I was given like the strength to carry on. It was kind of like the Beckett line: "I can't go on, I'll go on." There's a kind of a Beckettian vibe to some of the Fawlty Towers episodes, in my opinion. But
But you were already pretty familiar with the show when you watched this particular episode, or no?
I I'm not sure. I mean, I was a major Monty Python fan, and I'd seen all of the Monty Python episodes, but I didn't even know that Cleese had done like a sitcom after that at the time. So I think this was my first encounter. But then um,
Oh wow, okay.
I
This
realized,
episode,
well, the one called "The
the
Kipper and the
Kipper,
Corpse," not the one we're focusing on
right,
today,
right.
not Gourmet Night. But I mean, we can talk about "The Kipper and the Corpse" too. But yeah, you probably didn't see that one. But anyway, Basil Fawlty, played by John Cleese, at the end of the episode, in a kind of despair, uh, jumps into the laundry basket in which there had been a corpse, and is taken away by the laundry truck to escape the chaos of the hotel. The hotel being Fawlty Towers, the Fawlty Towers of the title. Uh, for those of you that have not seen the show, but yeah, I realized that this was aired regularly, I think on weekends, on the local PBS channel, public broadcasting service. It's public TV in the States, for those that don't know. This is before it became Pentagon broadcast service and just did war propaganda. But
I remember PBS showing various British programs. I mean, I think I watched Mr. Bean on there. There was also a show
Are
called.
You Being Served?
I don't know that. Um, do you know the show Chef that starred Lenny
Yes,
Henry?
yes, yes. That was on there too.
Okay,
Chef,
yeah,
Chef,
I used to really like that.
Mr. Bean. Are You Being Served? Fawlty Towers. Uh, there was a show called Allo Allo, uh,
I'm
and
trying to think
one
of one
called
show that my sister really liked, where it's like they do commentary over films, and it's like some kind of like space title.
Hmm.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I'm not sure. But
Okay, no worries.
there was another show called Keeping Up Appearances, and you know the whole point of PBS is that it's like quality television that you can't see on the major networks: ABC, NBC, CBS at the time. This is back when there were three major networks. Cable was just getting started. But it's like, okay, we don't know what to show. There's no good American TV, so let's just put on these British programs, and the dirty Yanks will think that's quality TV, which, in some cases it was. But something like Keeping Up Appearances and Are You Being Served, I mean, that's not necessarily better in terms of quality than um, American sitcoms of the time. But yeah, I was a
I found the show, by the way, but I don't think it's British. It's not British. It's Mystery Science Theater 3000. Did you
well,
ever watch that?
PBS had a lot of uh, you know other shows, but no, I'm not familiar with that. But in addition to these
Okay.
sitcoms, they would have Masterpiece Theater, for example, and they would have Mystery, hosted by the wonderful Diana Rigg. Um, and my mom would watch like Agatha Christie uh, specials, and there was Sherlock Holmes with Jeremy Brett, I believe his name was, and Poirot mysteries with I think that guy's name is David Suchet. But
Carmen San Diego.
Well, that's on PBS2 and Sesame Street
Reading
and so on.
Rainbow.
Well,
It's
those
Reading
are those are
Rainbow.
American. Those are American shows,
I know.
though.
I just that's
So
my
I'm
those are my
thinking of
PBS memories.
yeah. So I'm thinking of like these British uh, series that were aired. But yeah. As a
Today, of
young,
course, if you want some high quality programming, you have to turn on RT. Sorry. Sorry.
that's what Putin puppets such as yourself would say.
Well, they feature all your favorite liberals on RT now, right?
Do they? I don't even
Yeah, I mean,
know.
like Jimmy
RT
Dore
was
was on there
scrubbed.
for years. Max Rushton, uh,
Okay,
that
but the
that girl that you like, that the kind
Abby
of
Martin.
attractive. Yeah, exactly. She's on RT all the time.
Well, Chris Hedges, but it was all scrubbed. All of their episodes were scrubbed from YouTube. You didn't know that?
No.
Yeah. Anyway, um, yeah, as a young adolescent stoner, I was a Monty Python fan. I'm sure I know I've seen all the Monty Python TV episodes because I just rewatched them. They're now on Netflix. But back in the day, I'd seen them all multiple times, often while high. And then there were the Monty Python movies, and there were records. Like I had cassettes of some of their work. But then I discovered Fawlty Towers later, and I've seen there were 12 episodes in all, right? 2 seasons of 6 episodes each, and I've probably seen all 12 episodes, 5 times. And in preparation for this show this week, I watched all 12 again and enjoyed them, but my reactions were somewhat different, and we can get into that. But this was your first encounter with Fawlty Towers, and you watched a couple of episodes before uh, you watched the one we're going to focus on from season 1, Gourmet Night, and you were not that impressed. It wasn't really your thing. So I'm eager to hear about your experience with it and what you didn't like about it, and then if maybe your feelings about it change. So please.
Okay. Yeah. It's one of those iconic shows that has such an aura around it. First of all, so for me, other show like Blackadder is also in that world. Did you ever watch Blackadder?
I know it's the Rowan Atkinson uh, show, but no, I've seen one episode, but I never got
Okay.
into that.
Okay. Anyway, I knew the basic premise of the show, like that there's the waiter and the hotel manager. So I must have seen some excerpts in the past, but yeah. First of all, I've tried repeatedly to get into Monty Python and I can't, and that annoys me to some extent. It's like one of those things where you think something's wrong with you,
You need to watch it
and
while high.
maybe. Um, and as far as like this past week and a half when I've been watching, you correctly predicted, as usual, that it would grow on me because it appears that some of the texts that you recommend, I initially kind of recoil from, and panic and say, I don't know, maybe we shouldn't use this as a text because I'm just not into it. And yeah, I've enjoyed each episode that I've watched more than the previous. So I watched the first 2 episodes. Just the farce seemed over the top. I'm not really into slapstick. I'm kind of more into brainy or quirky humor. Um, so just the tenor of what you later explained to me is called Whitehall Farce. It just didn't resonate. I talked to various people. I would say it's kind of like a 50-50 split between people who adore it, mainly because they grew up on it, and people who feel like it didn't age well or just couldn't get into it. So I just kind of assumed that I was in the latter group, but enjoy the psychiatrist more, and genuinely was laughing yesterday at Gourmet night. And
So you watched four altogether.
four altogether, but because it's like a nice growth scale that I'm almost, I'm keen to watch more episodes, so I didn't think for sure, I definitely did not plan to have that perspective at the beginning. And yeah, and the last thing I'll say is, sometimes it's like we want to believe that we can make a connection with art without context and without background, like going to an art gallery, and you want to say, oh, well, I'll just connect to the paintings that speak to me immediately, or I speak to me viscerally. But time and time again in my life anyway, the background information is necessary to kind of open a piece of art, like a flower. So I sent you the link to the John Cleese commentary, and that's definitely enhanced my viewing. So it's like a play-by-play of that we found on YouTube. And when you see the absolute detail that goes into timing and each line, and how hypercritical he is to this day about where he thinks things could have been improved, you just appreciate the craft, and not only just like you appreciate it, like, oh, they worked hard, so I should enjoy it. Not just that, but it's just I don't know. It's just helped me. It's been like a nice gateway in, and
Well, yeah, that was a great resource that you found. I'm glad you sent me that. And I had never heard of Whitehall Farce, which he mentioned, he alluded to in the commentary. So, apparently there was some Whitehall theater, and I mean, there are different kinds of British farce apparently, and Whitehall is one particular style. I don't know exactly what he means by that, but we can talk about what farce in general is. I mean, why don't we do that before we go further? I was
okay.
interested to learn that, of course, I'm going to look at the etymology, but apparently farce, Farce, is derived from the Middle English farce, Fars, which is some kind of stuffing. And then, the Middle English is in turn derived from um, probably Old French, and then ultimately back to Latin. But it's some kind of stuffing, right? So it has to do with food, which is interesting because we think that the word satire which is from Latin satura, may be referring, we're not sure, but we think it might be referring to some kind of dish, like a kind of gumbo where everything is thrown in. It's kind of a mishmash, if I can use that term.
Hodgepodge.
Hodgepodge, yes. So I I don't know what is the connection with eating. It makes me think of how farce is physical comedy, and it deals with very concrete matters. It's not that abstract kind of intellectual comedy that you mentioned. It's slapstick. It's there's often violence or the threat of violence, physical violence, um, and then some of the other characteristics. Here's just a definition from an online dictionary. Farce is a comic, dramatic work using buffoonery and horseplay. There's the slapstick you alluded to, and typically including crude characterization and ludicrously improbable situations. So there's a lot there that we
And
can
just to add to that,
discuss.
it seems like another element that he's constantly reiterating in the commentary is the element of which is actually the fifth episode we didn't mention, is communication problems. So I guess in a farce, that's often a critical element as well.
Uh,
Just being misunderstood, things not being
right, right. Well, yeah, that's so we've touched upon like the physical comedy, the slapstick, but language is also important in that there's often a kind of miscommunication, uh, which reminds me of like the Laurel and Hardy routine. Who's on first? Have you ever heard that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and but also uh, it's it reminds me of like theater of the absurd, the language games that are played with in the theater of the absurd. You know, whether it be Ionesco or Harold Pinter, uh, or Beckett. Sometimes, you know, language and miscommunication and misunderstanding is an important part of the dialogue of theater of the absurd. But you know, the physical quality, that the possibility of violence or the threat of physical violence reminds me of like the transgression of the theater of cruelty, where there's kind of a danger about it. And I don't know if you saw the episodes. Well, you probably did see some of the slapstick where Basil is physically abusing Manuel, for instance, and there are a couple of scenes where he almost like punches Polly, you know, or threatens to, like he almost elbows her in the face in one episode. That's actually in Gourmet Night. You remember that? He almost like backhands
Yeah, I
her
mean, I remember the extreme kind of like wrestling maneuver that he does to Manuel as well as like hitting him with a
in the
spoon and so on.
psychiatrist. Yes,
But it gets
yes,
really
exactly,
excessive.
exactly. Yeah. So this is the kind of over the top stuff that you didn't like. Is that right?
I guess so. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right.
But
But even just the kind
you're
of like just the importance of timing, and just the kind of like I don't know, there's that element where and the laugh track. I don't like the laugh track.
well,
Um,
it's a lot. It was filmed before a live studio audience.
yeah, I want to understand that. So that what does that mean exactly? I mean, I haven't. I know SNL is the same way, right? But so it just means that they
Well,
have chairs
SNL
out. People are just sitting there.
SNL is broadcast live, but there are many shows from that era that were filmed before a live studio audience. No, they invite the public in. We're
Okay.
filming, you know, this week's episode of Fawlty Towers, and people show up, and it's like they're watching a play, but it's a teleplay and it's being filmed and then it's broadcast later. So it's not a laugh track.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
he
Yeah.
in the
Yeah. But they do
commentary,
lots.
but
Sorry. No. No. But they do.
they keep it in. You want to
I just
raise your
wanted to
hand?
ask. No. No. I just wanted to ask. Like, but they do as many takes as necessary, right?
Um, I'm not sure about that. I heard something in the commentary. He said like we would have 2 hours to film one 30-minute episode. So
Okay.
I think they had to rehearse, and they basically perform it like a play. If there's like a major mishap, maybe they can reshoot a scene or two. But I think mostly it was just done as a 30-minute performance. That's
So
my impression.
how many shows? I mean, when did that approach to comedy, is that finished or shows still shot like that?
Well, I mean, Cheers in the 80s was filmed before a live studio audience. They would always say that at the beginning. Cheers
Was
is filmed
Seinfeld?
before a live studio audience. Seinfeld was too. Yes, I think so. I think so.
Okay, interesting. But does regardless of the sets, like if they were in the cafe as well, in the restaurant.
Yeah, they would just have the set built. Like they would have Jerry's apartment, that was one set, and then they would have, what was the restaurant they always went to? Monk's or whatever it was.
All right. Well,
Then
let me ask. I just don't understand even just the sound of that, though. Like okay, I get it. It's a live audience, but it seems so manufactured. Or like what? People are just sitting there like chipmunks. Like I wouldn't be able to like sustain that much laughter for a long period of time. You know what I'm saying? Like, are they just all like high on helium? Like, how do you get
well,
such a kind of orchestral?
because it's a I think, I mean, I don't know, uh in that I've never been at such a recording. Like I've not been a member of a live studio audience of a TV show, but when I go to the theater, there's definitely a different vibe than when I'm watching something by myself or with one or two other people on Netflix. There's a there's a communal aspect, and people feed off of each other's
Okay, yeah, I get
reactions.
that. It still sounds
But
kind of like too
well, sometimes
parody
it's
or
fake. Sometimes it's fake. Sometimes it is a laugh track that they just artificially insert, which is why I think certain shows would mention that. It's like they're telling you this is real. What you're hearing is real time reaction. It's not fake.
right.
You know. So they would say whatever show, fill in the blank, is filmed before a live studio audience.
I
Um,
did find it interesting how often Cleese would bring up the audience on the commentary and the
yeah.
reaction, the various reactions, right?
Yes,
Like,
he would
oh,
say.
we never know what's gonna work and so on.
Yeah, he'd say like, "Oh, this got a bigger laugh than I expected," or that
Yeah,
that that deserved to get a bigger laugh than it got.
right.
Uh, he would say, "I think that was a good line. I'm surprised no one reacted." And there are different reasons for it. Sometimes it might be an issue with the audio; it wasn't as clear as it could have been, or maybe the timing was off, or whatever. Something else was distracting people visually, and so they didn't hear whatever. But yeah, so all right, you mentioned Seinfeld, so of course I have to mention Larry David. I know you love Larry David. Is Curb Your Enthusiasm not also farce of a sort? I mean, it deals with improbable, ridiculous, ludicrous situations, doesn't it? And you could also say that there's crude characterization, referring back to our dictionary definition of farce.
Well, I would say that the characters seem more believable, and there's not the that level of like choreography, in a way. Like it's more improvised. We know
More
that there's
improvised. Yeah.
and I don't know. It definitely just feels more, in some way, realistic, even though it's over the top too in its own way.
But
But
can we categorize it as farce? Is Curb Your Enthusiasm farce?
I wouldn't call it that. But I can
Okay.
see how there are elements of it for sure.
Hmm. Well, another aspect of it is that it's often lowbrow. It's kind of um, not respectable comedy. It's maybe it's because of the horseplay and the slapstick, but it's kind of vulgar in a way. But
Right.
wouldn't
Despite we
Kirk?
know, even though we know how much thought goes into it, so it's like
Yeah,
obviously meticulously planned. But
but wouldn't Curb Your Enthusiasm qualify as vulgar at times? I mean, it deals with taboo subject matter, right? It's transgressive in a
yeah,
sense, And it
But who's Jeff? I saw Jeff like interviewed about Curb, and he said something like he was proud that really the difference between someone who likes Curb and someone who doesn't is like how smart they are. So he was kind of like suggesting that yeah, the audience of Curb is like just a brighter audience than your. So
well,
that's not lowbrow.
this was the yeah, but I mean maybe it's high and low, which
Yeah,
which is often what I aspire to in my own work, right? Like
for sure.
I want I want to, I guess in a sense, blur the distinction between the high and the low, or at least call it into question, you know.
Right.
But I think this came up in another episode. Maybe it was what would it have been? I can't remember now, but I know I've mentioned the Russian uh, literary theorist Bakhtin, right? And I couldn't remember the phrase uh, that he's famous for, but I looked it up because I thought of it again while preparing for this episode. It's called the material bodily lower stratum, or
I
the
feel like I
gro-
looked it up last time when I read it or something, and then
okay,
you were like, yeah.
or the
Anyway,
grotesque body. Well, what were we talking about? What
yeah, the
episode was that?
grotesque body.
What episode was that?
I
You
don't know, bro.
remember?
Sorry, no.
Well, grotesque, of course, reminds us of the Gogol episode, right? But uh, the the material bodily lower stratum, okay, this was first developed in his book on the work of Rabelais. And, you know, the idea is that humor, satire, comedy, um, often refers to these very materialistic uh, issues, right? Like it's the area of the body where the genitals and the stomach are located, right? So it's all about eating, sex drive, you know. So there are
Farting,
there's
pooping.
exactly there's farting, belching, you know, sexual innuendo, and you know this is we can take this
Welcome to
back
the
to
whole life of my household. This is
okay
this is like 90% of me and Liliana's humor, for better or worse. But
okay
anyway,
that might be too much information, but I accept it, you know. I mean, this takes us back to ancient times. This is the comedies of Aristophanes, which are filled with sexual jokes and I mean scatological jokes, uh, and you know, there's kind of another concept of Bakhtin's is the carnivalesque, which is all about eating and indulging of the physical desires. So I I like all of this kind of comedy because it has a kind of leveling effect. It reminds us that ultimately people ain't shit. You know, like for all our highfalutin, highbrow aspirations, and again, it's not either or, it's both and. We can have all these, but we must always remember that we have this material essence too, right? Like we can't be guided solely by uh idealism and our or what intellectualism. We don't live only in the world of ideas. We have a material existence, and if we forget it, we're going to be we're in for a rude awakening, you know. uh it's like I don't know, there's an Indian myth about uh a god that or a prince that uh, after meditating on these philosophical ideas, you know, with his head lost in the clouds, as it were, walked out in the street and was run down by an elephant. Like if you
Yeah, I mean it's hubris, right? That's the classic.
yeah, if you don't you can believe in magic and mysticism and I don't know, platonic ideals, but if you don't pay attention to concrete reality, you're going to be in trouble. You're going to experience a kind of shipwreck, as Carl Jaspers would refer to it as.
Yeah, what you're saying reminds me of another interview that I just heard with John Cleese, a more recent one, kind of promoting the new reboot and so on. But he was talking about the king's coronation and just how,
I
for
saw
him,
that.
this was like, yeah, this was the epitome of hilarity, really, because the kind of self delusion that requires to maintain this level of pageantry and seriousness is just so unfathomable, especially in like our modern day context. Like, how can a person take themselves that seriously to go through with that, and even I think, like the Pope has made some efforts, like the present day Pope has made some effort to, I think, reduce the decorum and the ceremoniousness that is often required of the papacy, but it's still pretty insane, I mean,
Of
the
course.
ceremony that's required, and so
And all that's necessary to puncture that pomposity, right, is for someone to rip a fart, you know,
right.
or belch loudly, or I don't know, take a piss or a shit, like the reminder, or I don't know, some kind of reference to that, to Bakhtin's material bodily lower stratum, that just demolishes all pretense of, you know, what,
Delusions of
pomposity.
grandeur.
Yeah, grandeur, delusions of grandeur. Yeah. So that's why I've always loved farce and low comedy, because um it's a kind of check on all of those. uh, I mean, I've had like these idealistic impulses and these feelings of, I don't know if they're delusions of grandeur, maybe they are, but like over idealization of things, like I felt like I had what might be called an Icarus complex, and I've often, in some of my, I don't know, artistic or intellectual uh projects, flown too
I'm
close
thinking
to the
I'm
sun.
thinking of your epic poem, which I
Yeah,
respect, by the way. I'm not mocking it, but it's like, yeah, it's the
yeah,
endeavor of that part of you, I would say.
yeah, but it has to be counterbalanced by some of the dirty stories I've written.
Right.
Yeah, I recently posted an excerpt from my story, A Tale of Two Blowjobs, on my Substack. So,
I've skimmed it. Yeah.
yeah, so enjoy. Um, all right, so let's
Are we gonna
talk.
get into this particular episode a little
Let's
bit?
That's exactly what I was thinking we should do
Okay.
now that we're almost 40 minutes in. Let's talk about Gourmet Night. Tell me your impressions.
Uh, well, first of all, I don't know why, but the topic of food is always fun, as like a background. So I enjoyed that. I was just excited when when food was going to be the major topic. Um, obviously, the issue of class is central. So it's become very apparent. Like, I didn't realize that at the beginning, but that's like a major trope of the show, right? Is that John Cleese is, well, the Basil character aspires to ascend in his social class, and that's a very British thing. We know the class issues, and so yeah, it's quite funny the way he contrasts the riffraff who come and want more salad cream for their chips, and then he's put on this whole gala. And so yeah, that's like obviously the source of a lot of the humor. But yeah, I just found it funny, a lot of slapstick, but very enjoyable too. And I liked the love story between Manuel and Kurt, which is like kind of predates homosexuality being such a major topic everywhere, but like it's like, you know, that was like before all that. So it's kind of interesting that they've made that have such a prominent role in the episode. But I don't know. What about you?
Well, this episode includes two of my favorite scenes in the whole series, you know, or
Okay.
in the two series. You alluded to one of them, the salad cream. So there's the young boy complaining about the chips, right? He's like, they're the wrong shape. And Basil says, "Oh, what kind of shape would you prefer? Amphibious landing craft shape?" Uh, just the absurdity of the suggestions. I mean, that's
By the way, did you watch the commentary for this episode?
I didn't know.
It's just interesting because he says that he thinks in hindsight the lines that the boy delivers were all a bit too harsh. So if he thinks that,
I think
like,
they're
he wouldn't have
great.
said like you idiot at the end. He would have said like he would have made the same criticisms, but he wanted to temper it down because he worried that it wouldn't be believable.
Oh, I thought
Maybe.
that's what I liked about it. It was so over the top. You know, in another episode, there's Sybil references Basil's sledgehammer wit. The implication being that it's not subtle, right? Wit we think of as being clever and intellectual, right? But if you have a sledgehammer wit, it's like over the top. You use a
Yeah, he uses that
sledgehammer
word a
when
lot in the commentary, sledgehammer.
so, so I like that aspect of it. I mean, it's so outrageous. The kid says, "God, you're dumb," and
Right.
and then and then Basil elbows him in the head. And he says, "Oh, sorry, sorry." And I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, even though it is over the top, it's also quite witty in a subtle way. You know, the mother says, he's rather highly strung," and then Basil says, "Yes, he should be." Did you catch
Hmm.
that? And
I did, and I remember like pausing, like, yeah, like okay, like that would be highly strung as in terms of like a punishment, yeah.
well, the mom saying like
No, I get the
he's
mom's comment, but I
anxious,
wasn't sure
right?
exactly what the retort meant.
It means like he should be hanged, you know?
That's what I thought. Okay, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He should be strung up, you know?
right.
So there's that scene. And then, of course, and uh, Craig alluded to this when he recommended
Can I
Gourmet
guess
Night.
first? Let me
Yeah,
guess.
it's an
Is it gonna
iconic
be?
scene.
Is it stuff to do with like stepping on the duck and just, or is it opening up the thing and it being the trifle? Is it either of those?
No, there's a
Okay.
more iconic scene than that. It's when he gives the car a thrashing.
Okay. I didn't
Yeah,
laugh as much about that, but
that the first time I saw that, I almost died. I mean, so those two scenes are among my favorites in the whole, you know, history of the show.
just because of the absurdity of that, of hitting the
Yeah,
car.
yeah. He gives the car a warning, and then you see him leave the shot, and he returns with with a branch, you know,
Switch.
a
Yeah.
switch, yeah, and he gives it a damn good thrashing. And
Yeah.
he has to leave the car apparently and then run back with the tray, which has been, you know, misplaced. Again, there's miscommunication and misdirection, which causes some of the absurd, ludicrous situations to develop. But what else? What else about the episode impressed you or interested
Well, I wanted
you?
to ask you, like, would any part of you concede that this show feels dated, or would you say it's like absolutely
Oh
on
yeah.
point? It doesn't.
Well, I'll tell you the episode that, yeah, I don't think you've seen this one, but it's in some ways the most famous episode.
You're gonna
It's
say the Germans,
yeah,
yeah.
it's season 1, episode 6, the last episode of season 1, the Germans, which includes the famous line, "Don't mention the war." But also in that episode, the major, well, he drops the N bomb. So
Really?
yeah, but you know, it's it's not like an endorsement of the word. You're what's happening is this character, this stock character, and I think stock characters are typical of farce too, right? In that sense, it's kind of like the old Italian commedia dell'arte, where you had these these stock characters or caricatures, um, who were just like stereotypes, you know. And so here
Yeah.
you've got the stereotypical British social climber represented by Basil. His I don't know. Would you say that Sybil? I don't know how you would describe Sybil, but then you've got the of course
Come on, you
man.
got to attempt it.
Well, Manuel is the more obvious example, but the major too, like the retired military guy that's a bit, you know, out of it, a bit thick, right? And has some colonial prejudices that are mocked and ridiculed.
By the
Uh,
way, Cleese said that writing his character was the most enjoyable of all the characters. I mean, writing the lines for the Colonel, which is just interesting. I thought they loved
okay.
writing that particular character.
Okay. Or the major or colonel.
Yeah, the Major. Sorry, yeah, the Major.
Yeah. Played by Ballard Barkley. But I don't know why I remember that name, but that's the actor's name. Okay, I didn't know that. But why? Why do you think that is? Why would they be the most
You
enjoyable?
you would be able to speculate better than I would because I haven't watched enough. I don't know. I don't quite have a feel for that character
Well,
based on the few episodes I've watched.
I mean, he misunderstands things and he forgets things. He has memory lapses too, and then
Right.
he says inappropriate things. I think
Mm.
that's one reason why maybe he's, and see, this is another characteristic of farce. Maybe there is this inappropriate behavior that and speech that makes us uncomfortable, and you know, it was less amusing, not so much because of the language that seems dated, but just the scenario didn't seem as humorous. The premise of being uncomfortable about the war with these Germans was less amusing to me this time than it was before. And truthfully, I don't think the Germans was ever my favorite episode. I think, you know, the psychiatrist, uh, Gourmet night, uh, I always like communication problems too. I know you weren't as impressed with that. I think communication problems is brilliant. The annoying woman with the hearing aid and the way Basil interacts with her, it's hysterical. The anniversary is a great one, and the last one, Basil the rat, I think is quite good. But the Germans was never my favorite. But this is the most controversial, and it was actually removed from the BBC streaming service or whatever. And Cleese was outraged by this, and frankly, it is. It's absurd. If you want to have some kind of disclaimer at the beginning, like some speech in this episode is dated, but you're gonna fucking remove it and not allow people to see it. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. We can't see it and judge for ourselves. It's like banning. It's not even like that. I was gonna say it's like banning, the protocols of the elders of Zion or Mein Kampf or something. It's not. It's not. It's nothing like that, right? But even those works are available. We can still read them and know what they say, whether we agree with them or not. Like if we're not allowed to see this supposedly taboo material, like, of course, all that does in the end is make people want to read it or view it or whatever. When you ban it, that just increases the demand for it, right? Like
well, sometimes, not always. I mean,
well,
Kanye
usually,
West is lost his relevance. He's been like blacked out, no pun intended, to that degree.
well,
You know what I
but
mean? He just has
think of
he has
think
no
of like
outlet.
think of like Alex Jones when he got removed from, I don't know, all the social media channels. Then he blew up on his website, I think. And
Yeah,
there are other
sure.
examples of that too. Tropic of Cancer, when that was the subject of an obscenity lawsuit, or D.H. Lawrence, or Ulysses by James Joyce. That kind of notoriety uh, just raises its profile. But anyway, I find that to be a completely stupid editorial decision. We're going to ban this episode, and of course people can find it online anyway at any number of sites, so it's just totally pointless. If you want to have a little disclaimer to cover your ass, then go ahead, but to not allow people to see it, I mean, it's ridiculous. And it's not like the use of the language is being endorsed. It's mocked, it's satirized.
Right. Do we want to talk in the same vein a little bit about the Manuel character?
We have to do that. We have to do that. So you sent me something interesting, which I didn't know. Like in different countries where it's broadcast, the Manuel character is presented differently. Like you said, in Spain he's an Italian, and in other places he's a Mexican. And
Right. In the
you want to
Catalan.
right you want to elaborate on that?
Well, first of all, I mean, I do think that you couldn't get away with that character today. That's one thing. And while I'm not like saying, I know, and I don't know how I feel about that, but it makes me a bit uncomfortable, that character. Like, I think it's funny, and I'm not thrilled with the caricature. So it's like, I don't think it's completely bad that you couldn't get away with this today. And when I say you couldn't get away with this today, I don't necessarily mean like because of the reaction, although that's probably what would happen. I mean, the woke reaction is the thing that wouldn't allow it. But even outside of that, you probably just would think that it's a bit vulgar, to It's like I don't know. Um, I got Carlos to watch a little bit of it and just asked. I wanted to get his reaction, and
Carlos,
he
your
he can
Spanish friend.
right, and
Yeah.
he reacted like in a very intellectual way. Like he just says like he doesn't believe in being offended ever, and that like for him this is just a challenge. So like to fight back, like fight back through art or
Mm-hmm.
through an, but it still seemed a bit like abstract what he was saying. So because he still really wasn't answering the question directly. Or, like I didn't really care whether he was like offended like in a oh way. I just meant like is it problematic? Maybe would have been a better question. Like you know what I mean? Like is I think there's like some people see the word offended as the as like they object to that word because it seems like it's just a source of complaint and not
Mm-hmm.
it's just crying without any kind of like purpose. So I
But
think
could
he
we?
doesn't want to see it as yeah.
Well, could we say that the depiction of Manuel and the caricature of him is itself a kind of satire of British, middle class views or British uh, ethnocentrism that was prevalent at that time?
Yeah, I think that's a smart take. But you still have the character though. But yeah,
I
that's
mean,
definitely an element of it.
well, but it also you could say, well, it's ageism and uh, the depiction of the major is that's ageism, and they're like mocking his dementia and his disabilities, but
Right.
it adds to the miscommunication, right? Like the the native English speakers misunderstand each other because of language, but then when you add a non-native speaker into the mix who's struggling to learn English, it's there are more comic possibilities, right? Like in the psychiatrist episode, he's trying to explain Manuel is trying to explain to Sybil how Basil is looking in the window, and he says he crazy for this girl. He crazy. He tried to look in her window and he go crazy. And
Right, right.
Sybil misunderstands and you know slaps the shit out of Basil. And then later Manuel explains what he said to Sybil, and that further enrages Basil, and it's just one miscommunication after another. More of these communication problems.
Yeah, I mean I can't imagine like John Cleese thinking that Spanish people are like dumb, for example. Like I don't think he would think that. So
No,
in
but
that
he's
sense, I think yeah,
well, but he's using some offensive ethnic slurs, right? Like he calls him a dumb dago or something, which
yeah,
which would be, you know, I mean, you hear that in like Italian gangster films, the term guinea or whatever. Uh, so we've heard these words before, but the way he so shamelessly uses them when he's angry, it's not an endorsement of it. It's like, you know, he's being ridiculed. What it, I think Basil is like Larry in Curb Your Enthusiasm. Do we're not supposed to admire this guy, right? We're just
of
supposed to
course,
laugh at him because he's so absurd. He's so ridiculous,
sure.
and he blames. You know, he has no self-critical faculty, right? Like everything he blames on Polly or Manuel or his wife. And let's talk about the wife, Sybil. What do we have to say about her? I love the
I don't
actress
know.
Prunella Scales. I think she's lovely. I really like her. She's now demented, by the way. She's suffering from dementia in her 80s or whatever. She may be 90 by
Okay.
now. But I think she's charming, and in a strange way, she's kind of sexy.
Yeah, I would grant you that. I mean, I've already told you how sexy Polly is. Um, Man, she was wearing something on one of the episodes where it was very,
Well, she's
very
wearing she's
revealing.
wearing a low cut top, and Basil's looking at her, and he answers the
No
phone. And he
bra.
says, "Faulty titties." That's that's when he's looking at. Oh, you didn't see that one. That's when he's looking at. I think that's the wedding. I think it's called the wedding or the wedding party. The wedding, I want to say. Yeah, well, I mean, how about the girl that plays the
The Aussie.
Australian? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
In the psychiatrist.
Smoking hot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a French woman named Mrs. Penoir. I don't know if she's actually French, but she's playing a French woman in one of the other episodes. I think that's the wedding as well from season 1. But yeah, there's some nice eye candy, I guess you could say. Uh well, we're up on an hour here. What else do you want to
I'm gonna
mention?
brief. Well, I just want to briefly tell you I am having connectivity issues in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that I can hear you well, but 90% of the time I'm just looking at a frozen image of you, which is so it's like distracting because I just get like a shot like this for a while,
Oh,
and then it's
really?
like this for a while. Yeah,
Okay.
so I don't know if you're using the same internet as usual, but it's like making it a little bit less enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
It's making me a bit on edge. That element, just to get meta for a second. I don't know.
Should
Hopefully we can.
should be the same. I don't know. I don't think I've connected to a different. Uh,
I mean, I can just pretend that I'm just listening to you. Focus on that. Um, Anything else I want to say? I don't know. I don't think it's like I have a little bit of just about the whole experience of the show, but like that is like a residue with me. I'm sorry to be like a downer, but I just there's something about it that still feels like a tiny bit deflating to me. Like I don't know, or I want to like criticize something about it.
you want to or you
I can't.
don't want to?
I do. Like I don't know. I still feel like there's something about him that he's a bit smug. Like even in
Basil or
commentary.
John Cleese?
No, John Cleese. John
Oh, I
Cleese.
see.
Like
Well,
a bit.
okay. All right. Well, I I can sympathize with that. I mean, Cleese was never my favorite Python. Okay, my favorite was Michael Palin, um, and I like Eric Idle. But I would say after those two guys, Cleese and Graham Chapman were my favorite Pythons. But I know you're a Norm Macdonald fan, and there would be no Norm
Become one.
Macdonald. There would be no Norm Macdonald without John Cleese. He was a huge John Cleese fan. I don't know if you know. I mean,
No, I didn't.
Monty Python in general, they were the Beatles of comedy. They revolutionized comedy in the English speaking world, I would say. So in that sense, I always give Cleese credit, but he was not my favorite member of that
Okay,
troupe.
you're saying that, yeah, in response to what I'm saying, but like I used the word smug. Like is that a word that speaks to you in any way about Cleese?
Well, maybe. I mean, he was more like some of the other Pythons complained about him because he was always, when they were like writing a new movie or planning a new project, he was off shooting commercials and doing other things. So he he was the one who became like the breakout star, kind of like Chevy Chase was the breakout star of SNL. It's like,
Or Steve Martin?
well, Steve Martin wasn't a regular cast member, but yeah. Um, so like some people have suggested that he was not like a team player in the way that the others were, and he maybe sold out more so than the others. I don't necessarily accept that, but he was more, he was more famous, I think, than the others. Like he was probably the best known of all of them, and he was in more stuff. And
Yeah. Okay. Well,
less.
just I'm basing this on a.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay, I'm basing this on a very like barely imperceptible tinge on the commentary. That's where I'm basing this off. It's just something that, even though he's kind of like, he'll criticize stuff about the show, even that feels a bit like he's so self-confident that he can do that. It's not like there's never like any genuine insecurity in the way he comes across. So I guess I just feel like there's a certain sense of like bloated self-importance, and that is like a turnoff to me in a way. Like or even just the way he'll talk about his marriages, and like he'll do it in such a casual way, and like, oh yeah, I've been married to 3 Americans, and like that's fine. Like if he's, why shouldn't a person should be happy with themselves? Like, and I shouldn't resent them for that. But if we talk about like relatability, I don't really feel like like Larry David, he doesn't have that. Like he'll be super rich, and we talked about that too, and he'll be the first to say that he's got a shitload of issues.
Well, so
but Cleese just struck me as like quite self-satisfied.
There's less self-deprecation in his comedic approach. Yeah, I guess you could say
maybe
that.
not his comedic approach, his human approach.
Like maybe, but I think he. I mean, I don't know. I'd have to consider that he's less self-deprecatory than Larry David for sure, but
I think my take here is a little bit boring, to be honest. Like, it's very like Holden Caulfield. Like, oh, I sense a little bit of phoniness there. Like whatever. Like going at someone's ego is kind of like,
yeah, it doesn't.
I don't know. I think
it
it's
doesn't
like lame.
It doesn't bother me as much, but as I say, I like him, but he was not my favorite Python. What can I tell you?
So, on the topic of Python, like for someone like me, maybe who's been on the outside, hasn't really got into it, but like obviously I can get into stuff more with a little help. It's just like poetry for me, to be honest. Like a lot of poetry, until I've had a professor's help. I know you're like an autodidact, but until I've had a professor's help, I don't often like appreciate it fully. So maybe I could even seek out some commentary or analysis. But where would you say, what's like the creme de la creme of the Python stuff?
Honestly, I think the show went downhill after he left. After Cleese left Monty Python, there was a drop off. There's still some good episodes, but like the last season is the weakest probably.
Okay, but I mean, like from the whole thing. What's the?
You mean which episode or which?
I don't even what. So it was like a TV show, and they made a bunch of movies, right?
Yeah.
So do you want to even break down the structure? Because I don't even know the structure of
Well, I
it.
mean, it was a sketch. Uh, it's a sketch comedy TV show. I guess you'd say it's like a surrealistic uh, sketch comedy show. Um, the movies are different. There's like Monty Python and the Holy Grail, The Life of Brian, uh, The Meaning of Life. Um, those are like feature films with straight narratives, but the TV show is just like a series of skits and sketches.
Well, what's
So,
the best in your opinion?
well, I mean, one of the best is Eric Idle and Terry Jones's Wink Wink Nudge Nudge, or Nudge Nudge Wink Wink. That's a great sketch. Uh, Cleese is in a great uh, cheese shop sketch with Michael Palin, and also with Michael Palin they do the parrot sketch. That's not my favorite, but it's one of the most famous. So just go to
Do you prefer
YouTube.
the show to the film?
They're different. I mean, I haven't seen the films in a while, but it just depends on one's mood. But just go to YouTube and look up like cheese shop sketch, or parrot sketch, or nudge nudge wink wink. Um, yeah, off the top of my head, those are three of the best. But
And
there's
then
so many.
you
There's so many. There's so many. Like Graham Chapman did a lot of. He was in a lot of great sketches, and he was Cleese's writing partner. And Cleese talks about how that was one major reason why he left, because Graham Chapman, his writing partner, was descending into alcoholism, and he couldn't write, he couldn't perform, and the others were not forced to carry that burden and deal with him. So he felt like he was unfairly blamed. They were upset with him for leaving, but he felt like, yeah, but you didn't have to deal with Chapman.
and then you compared Monty Python to the Beatles in terms of their revolutionary influence. Uh,
Yeah,
is that based on their popularity as well, or just their influence? Like,
yeah, for sure.
was
Yes,
Monty
like
Python was that big where everybody loved it?
absolutely. Like the original SNL members, I remember reading like they met each other while waiting in line to see a Monty Python film. Like Chevy Chase and maybe it was Lorne Michaels. Like they just struck up a conversation while waiting in line to see a Monty Python film. So
Because
yes,
like when I watched the Monty Python and kind of like failed, I assumed maybe it's because it's kind of intellectual in a way that I wasn't getting it. So so the audience was not particularly like intellectual.
I
You're
I
saying
I think, I mean,
like it was absolutely mainstream.
well, no, it was kind of underground. It wasn't like, you know, I guess it wasn't as mainstream as the Beatles were at their height. So it was kind of an underground sensation. So maybe they were more like the Sex Pistols of British comedy. But I think the analogy is made because they, like the Beatles, they just revolutionized the scene and opened up new possibilities. Like they did things people hadn't done before in comedy and on TV, and it inspired many people, and they were able to take chances that they were encouraged and inspired to take chances that maybe they wouldn't have before, or it wouldn't have occurred to them to take before.
Fair enough.
But one other thing about like the dating of comedy, I call this the Lenny Bruce factor. Uh, Lenny Bruce, right? Like the taboo breaking or taboo
This is the
violating
chef coming back to chef.
chef.
Wait, am I tripping?
No, Lenny Bruce, the Jewish
Okay, I
American
thought it was the
comic.
Jewish guy. Yeah, who
Yeah,
might? Who's Lenny? Lenny Henry's. Okay, Lenny
yeah.
Henry is chef. But I did know you were talking about Lenny Bruce, and then for a second I was like, wait, maybe he's talking about.
No,
Okay,
not
all right.
Chef. And Chef, I believe,
Yeah,
was
yeah.
was married to Dawn French, wasn't she? Wasn't he, rather? He was married to one of the members of French and Saunders, if I remember correctly. That's neither here nor there. Uh,
Okay, so Lenny Bruce.
Lenny Bruce is who we're talking about. And, Joe Rogan has pointed this out too. Like, it was revolutionary at the time, but if you listen to it now, it's not that funny. It doesn't always make sense, and it's hard to follow. uh and you could also apply that to like the stand up of Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy is apparently like embarrassed by Delirious and Raw and some of those specials that were huge in the 80s. Like Eddie Murphy was the shit. That was like,
Yeah, yeah. That's the impression I get.
yeah, I mean, I lived through that. I remember that, and it was,
But embarrassed because it's not PC, or because of the quality.
yeah. It's just so. It just seems so dated. It just doesn't. It doesn't seem as funny now. I mean, you can watch some of the old clips. Some of them hold up, but others are cringy in a way.
I
And so
understand, but I'm saying, is it cringy because the views seem backwards, or because just the delivery, or both?
it could be both, but probably more the former than the latter. Like it's
Yeah.
still
Okay.
the craft is still there, but some of the subject matter is just like, that's not so funny anymore. And
Well, I mean, like taking a more extreme example, like Charlie Chaplin and that whole genre. I can't really get into that. I've watched a couple. I mean, Chaplin has moments, but it's like, yeah, that's not. It's not gonna. That's not my brand. That's not
yeah,
my. It would not be my
yeah.
go-to.
Well, and again, going back to Aristophanes, sometimes we're like trying to interpret this ancient Greek text. It's like, what is he talking about? And how was that considered funny? So our
Was there a
standards,
lot of comedy in Greek theater?
yeah, Aristophanes is the king of Greek comedy, or old comedy as
Okay,
it's
I don't. I
called.
need. We need to look at some of his work then, because I think I'm. I don't really know his
Yeah.
stuff.
Well, I was mentioning it before. There's all like it's filled with sexual innuendo, and even the costumes. Like people would wear these gigantic phalluses, and uh, there were many references to Bakhtin's, material lower bodily stratum. Uh, and as I say, scatological jokes and so on. But the point is, like, standards change, and we have to allow for these historical and cultural differences. Like, if we are to assume, oh, now we've got it right, we know what's funny and what's not. Like, in 20 years, the shit that we're laughing at now might not seem funny, or maybe in even two
Well,
years.
for sure, stuff like I don't know. My colleague, another colleague, Keegan, was saying how he tried showing his students Key and Peele, Zero Reaction. He tried showing them another show which he something about English, which he said he compared to Fawlty Towers. The meaning of language, is that the name of the show? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No,
I bet you would. Mind Your Language. Have you heard of that?
no, I don't know that.
Okay, it's a British sitcom, ITV, 1977,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah. Anyway, the point is he was getting all these zero reactions from students.
Well, I know
But
people.
there's language barriers there too.
I know
That's a
people.
huge thing for comedy.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, I know people love Mr. Bean, but I'm not a huge fan. Like
I love Mr.
there's
Bean.
some.
I will ride for Mr.
So
Bean.
see, I mean, it's just a question of taste. We have to let 1,000 flowers bloom. Not put restrictions or bans or whatever. Like if you don't like it, don't fucking watch it. But don't prevent other people from watching it. You can't impose your standards on other people. I don't agree with that. All right.
For sure.
Let me ask one final question. Do you like roasts?
No.
See, I love roasts. So that's another. I love insult comedy. Do you like Don Rickles?
I'm aware of him, but I don't really like.
So see, this is maybe
awesome.
it's a generational thing. Like the whole point of Don Rickles was his insults. Like he would just destroy people, and he would roast people. And
I like a Ricky Gervais roast at the start of an award show.
Okay,
right?
well that's in the.
I just don't like the ones that are like so contrived and they like bring the person in, and they on like the Comedy Central was doing. I hate that stuff.
Oh, I like those. Some of those jokes are vicious.
Yeah, and I think it's not nice.
But I think there's a useful sociological aspect to that. It's like when during Roman processions the emperor would be followed by a slave who would be whispering in his ear, "You're mortal, you're mortal, you're mortal." Taking the piss out of celebrities and political leaders and I don't know, billionaires. That is an important sociological function. I think I'm all in favor.
Yeah,
of that.
you just made me think of. I like that. I like the White House roasts. Like when Colbert went in, that was amazing. It's like one of the best things I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
Before you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah,
Colbert,
before he
became shit.
Yeah. And
who was he roasting?
Bush.
Bush, yeah. 2006.
Yeah.
That's so classic.
Yeah.
White House Correspondents' Dinner.
Yes. And there have been other good ones too. One of the girls from SNL, I think her name is Cecily Strong. Hers was really good. Michelle Wolf's was really good during the Trump era.
Yes.
Cecily Strong's was during the Obama era, and she flamed him pretty well.
No, those are incredibly satisfying. So clearly I'm not anti the whole genre of roast. Something about the Comedy Central one just seems too brutal for me.
I like them. I like them. They're so.
I didn't even watch it.
Over the
I'm
top.
Just guessing from the way it's. Yeah.
So it's just a question of taste, but I think that's what I like about it. I like lowbrow comedy because it's leveling. It's a reminder that people ain't shit, or maybe people are shit. Like ultimately, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. From dust were you made, and to dust will you return. Like for all your high culture and your idealism, in the end, you are mortal.
Sure, but we wouldn't get great comedy without people having huge idealism, really. You know what I mean?
Okay, but it's both and.
It's all contradictory.
It's both and, baby.
Sure.
And on that note, why don't you tell us what's to come in our final episode of season 2.
Yeah, I'm super excited for the next episode. I am a high school English teacher, so that's now out there, and currently teaching Othello, and this will motivate me to become the expert that I want to be on Othello, is having an episode about it. So
Okay.
I think it's a great play. I think I'm excited to hear what you have to say about it. I feel like you always come with a level of knowledge and insight that is exciting for me. So yeah, I'm gonna watch lots of lectures. We can talk about race and but obviously not just that. But I think that, I mean, how familiar are you with Othello?
I mean, it's not my favorite Shakespearean play, but it'll be fun to revisit it.
It's not my favorite, but I'm just asking you how familiar you are with it. Like,
Well, I mean,
have you read it?
of course, multiple times I've seen theatrical productions, I've seen film versions, I've seen like adaptations, the teen movie I used to
I
teach
didn't see
that,
that.
like when I
Okay,
taught Othello,
interesting.
I would show to get these kids who didn't give a fuck about Shakespeare to,
Yo, heck,
engage with
yo.
the text. Yeah.
Yeah, I've watched
But
the 1995 Lawrence Fishburne one
yeah, I've seen
a
that
couple
too.
weeks
Yeah.
ago,
Yeah. Uh, Not my
and you
favorite,
know that
but
there's an Orson Welles version. Did you know
well,
that?
there's a Laurence Olivier version, and that we can talk about his blackface performance and what
I don't
that
even want to
means.
watch that. It looks so cringy.
Well, I think it's worth discussing, and
You know what's
it's
interesting is
part
there
of the
was a Royal
Shakespearean
Shakespeare
history.
Company. There was a 2016 production, I believe, by Iqbal Khan by the Royal Shakespeare Company, and it has a black Iago, which is kind of a cool take.
Mm.
So I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot, but a lot of rich language as well, which I think is pretty awesome. So
Hmm.
yeah, let's just see where it goes. But I think it should be fun.
Let's make the beast with two backs.
Yeah, but not with one another, maybe.
Uh, no, definitely not.
Okay. All right. Thank you guys for listening. Check out Fawlty Towers if you haven't before. Classic British comedy. We'll probably have a few contributions coming in. By the way, Mark, I've got a few people on promising me voice notes who are bigger fans of the show than I am. Not
Okay.
necessarily than you are, but
I'll
yeah.
I'll look forward to hearing those.
So
In the meantime, don't mention the war.